the blink rule. He had heard rumors about Route 59, a deserted highway slicing across the desert. It wasn't isolation he had feared, but the warning given by the attendant at the gas station as sunset approached. Don't blink more than once every 5 seconds, no matter what you see. At first he laughed at the rule, but with sunset sinking behind the dunes and the moon battening down the road in pale light, something shifted inside. His lights flickered. Shadows began dancing at the edges of his vision. Figures standing by the roadside, inching closer. Jerry focused. He counted. 1, 2, 3. The figures moved faster now, their hands stretched out toward the truck. He blinked, just once. The men vanished, or so he believed anyway. Then the radio sprang to life. A whispered voice, his voice, whispered, "Don't look in the mirrors." Jerry's better judgment compelled him to sneak a peek. A shadowy figure now sat in his back seat, grinning at him. For the rest of the night, Jerry drove, wide-eyed with horror, knowing that one more blink might seal his death. No lights after midnight. Sam was familiar with night halls, but something was different this particular night. It was approaching midnight when his radio started buzzing and beeping with an unusual signal. A static-filled voice warned, "Turn off your lights after midnight. Don't stop." He glanced at his watch. 12:03. Sighing, he flipped off the headlights. Darkness swallowed him. The road was an abyss before him. He gripped the steering wheel with clammy palms. Then he heard, pounding heart, pressing it into his ears. But then he saw them, on either side of the road, thousands of glowing eyes. They followed him with unblinking eyes, drawing ever closer with every mile. And he could feel their hunger. His hands itched to turn the lights on again, but the voice from the radio kept saying it. No lights, and don't stop. A trucker's instinct is to keep moving, but when something ran into his rig from behind, he felt this overwhelming urge to stop. He caught a glimpse of the shape in his mirror, something massive, crawling on all fours, keeping pace with his truck. The instant Sam lifted his foot from the gas, the creature launched. Panicked, he floored it, shattering through the night. He never felt like he dared to stop or turn on the lights again. What might be lurking just outside of the reach of darkness? The toll road's curse. People were telling Matt stories about the old mountain toll road, but he figured it was just one more ghost story. He'd paid his toll at dawn and been fine up until then, or so he had assumed. Halfway on the long haul, his CB radio echoed an odd voice, speaking smooth but in no dialect he knew so well from his trucking buddies. Take the toll, but whatever you do, don't look at the booth attendant. Matt laughed at it off, but he couldn't shake that feeling all the way till he reached the booth. The booth was lit up, and inside stood a figure motionless. He quickly paid the toll, but couldn't help looking up. The attendant's face hollow, his eyes sunk deep, as if staring into his soul. Then suddenly, the truck stalled. Thick air gathered around him. An eerie whisper echoed around him. You broke the rule. Matt frantically tried to start the engine again as the shadows around him began to move. Ghostly figures emerged from the forest as each one of them was a failed trucker. They surrounded his truck, closing it in. Their empty eyes were focused only on him. Matt stamped on the accelerator for an escape, but as he crested the bend and the road unfolded before him clearly, he could feel behind him their chill, lifeless presence waiting for him to break another rule. The Shadow Fleet. Jake had been driving long hauls for years, the road his only real companion. Tonight was no different, or so he thought. His route took him through the dense pine forests of northern Oregon. It was a lonely stretch of highway, to say the least, with miles of nothing but trees in every direction. He was used to isolation, actually finding it somewhat soothing. Tonight, however, the air felt different. The truck's CB radio one, that customarily would have been garbled with chatter amongst fellow drivers, had grown silent hours before. Too silent. The trees rustled with a gust of wind now and then, but beyond that, an unsettling stillness reigned. Even the moon hid behind thick clouds, casting the road in a veil of darkness. It finally crackled to life at 2 a.m. "Keep moving," a hushed voice whispered through the static. Jake furrowed his brow and moved the radio, trying to make out the transmission. "Don't stop, and when they join you, don't fall behind." It was gone in a moment, dissolving into static silence. He chuckled, shaking his head and writing it off as a weird message, probably kids messing with the frequencies. He adjusted his seat and kept going. That's when the lights showed up in his rearview mirror. A pair of headlights, distant at first, then closing with each tick of the clock. Other trucks? Jake hadn't seen a soul on this stretch of highway in hours. There were semi-trucks behind him, giant rigs much like his own, whose headlights burned brighter with every passing second. "Strange," Jake muttered. Still, he thought nothing more than another convoy catching up, and settled himself back in his seat, waiting for them to pass. But they didn't. Instead, they hung behind him, staying much closer than was comfortable. Beams from their headlights filled his cab, casting long, eerie shadows inside. Annoyed, Jake clicked on the CB radio. "Hey, fellas, mind giving me a little space?" No response. He waited a moment and tried again. "You're riding too close, man. Back off." Silence. The trucks remained on his tail, their engines humming louder. Something was not right. He could feel it right in the bottom of his gut. The road up ahead was endless, but the trucks behind him didn't make any attempt to pass. They just followed. Then his radio crackled to life again. The same voice, the same heavy static. "They've joined you. Keep your speed steady. Don't slow down. And whatever you do, don't look at their license plates." Jake's heart began to race. What the hell? His eyes instinctively darted to the mirrors, searching for a glimpse of the plates on the trucks behind him. Blinding light from their headlights illuminated his mirrors. The details couldn't be made out. Just two massive rigs tailing him, their lights too bright, their drivers unseen. The voice came again. "Don't look!" This time louder, near to despair. Jake's foot quivered over the brake. Something in him wanted to stop, wanted to let them pass, but his instincts shrieked at him not to. He clutched the wheel tighter, the palms of his hands slick with sweat. He pressed harder on the gas. Behind him, the trucks surged forward, as if to close the gap. Groaning, creaking metal met his ears, as Jake's rig picked up speed harder than he had ever gone before. Night was a blur around him. The road was endless, a black ribbon. He could hardly breathe, tension tugging at his chest. For the next several minutes, the two trucks followed in perfect sync, their engines roaring louder. The road ahead was still empty, no turn-offs, no rest stops, nothing but miles of asphalt. Jake's eyes flickered nervous again to the mirrors, and that's when he saw it. A shadowy figure standing on the roof of the nearest truck. It was tall, impossibly thin, with long, bony limbs that seemed to stretch toward the sky. His blood ran cold. The figure moved, crawling toward him, across the tops of the trucks, its form barely visible in the dim light. "Maintain your speed!" The radio crackled again. Jake's pulse thundered in his ears. He couldn't stop. He couldn't even blink. Every muscle of his body screamed to press the brake, yet the voice on the radio, his lifeline to sanity, kept him onward. All of a sudden, The trucks behind him veered into the shoulder, one on his left, one on his right. They had him bracketed now, their headlights waging level with his cab, their light flooding his vision. Now, Jake's heart was racing. "What do you want from me?" he yelled into the void, knowing full well nobody could hear him. The truck squeezed tighter, groaning to contain the pressure. The figure in dark was no longer there, at least. It no longer seemed to be. "Don't look. Don't stop," it exclaimed for the last time. The trucks veered off into the darkness just as quickly as they had appeared, and their lights disappeared among the trees. Jake was alone once more, the road stretching ahead, silent and still. His breathing came in ragged gasps now. He dared a glance at the clock on the dashboard, 3:15 a.m. He'd cleared the shadow fleet, but the warning still echoed in his brain. "When they join you, don't fall behind." Jake didn't dare look in the mirrors again. He continued to drive away, aware that whatever joined him in that car might be far from over with him.